Virgin village girl saved a drowning stranger with a long stick, unaware he's a billionaire prince. A violent river tore through Rosewood Bend like it was hunting someone. Lena Harper, 19, poor, untouched, and carrying a basket home from the market, froze when she heard it. A man was drowning, not a villager, not a fisherman. A tall black man in a soaked, expensive suit, his watch flashing under the water, thrashed as the current slammed him into rocks. People screamed from the bank, "Don't go in!" But Lena grabbed a long wooden pole, dropped to her knees in the mud, and shoved it into the raging water. "Hold it!" she cried. His hand caught the pole, and the river yanked them both. Lena's arms burned, her body sliding toward the edge, and she had no idea the man she was pulling from death was a billionaire prince whose enemies were already searching the riverbanks. Moment earlier, the river was angry that afternoon. Dark water rushed through Rosewood Bend, slamming against rocks, swallowing tree branches, roaring like it wanted to steal something from the world. Villagers gathered along the muddy bank, shouting, pointing, fear thick in the air. "Someone's in the water!" Lena Harper dropped the bucket she was carrying and ran. She was only 19, barefoot, her simple dress flapping as she pushed through the crowd. Her heart slammed against her ribs when she saw him, a man in a soaked suit, being dragged under again and again by the violent current. His arms flailed, his strength was fading fast. "Call for help!" someone yelled. "It's too deep!" Another cried, "He's gone!" A voice whispered in fear. But Lena didn't stop, her eyes locked on a long, thick wooden stick lying near the riverbank, part of an old fishing pole, rough and splintered. She grabbed it with both hands and sprinted to the edge. "Sir!" she screamed, her voice shaking but strong. "Hold on, please!" The man's head broke the surface for a second. His eyes, dark, desperate, met hers. He coughed, water pouring from his mouth, and then the river yanked him sideways again. Lena dropped to her knees in the mud and thrust the stick into the water as far as her arms would reach. "Grab it! Grab the stick!" His fingers brushed it once. Missed. Panic surged through Lena like fire. "Please," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Please don't let go." The river surged again, but this time the man's hand clamped around the stick. The moment he grabbed it, the force nearly pulled Lena in with him. Gasps erupted behind her as Lena's body slid forward, mud soaking her knees, her arms screaming in pain. She dug her feet into the ground, muscles trembling, palms burning as splinters tore into her skin. "I've got you!" she cried. "I won't let go!" The man coughed, barely conscious, his grip weak but desperate. Inch by inch, Lena pulled. Her back screamed, her arms shook violently. The river fought her like it was alive, tugging, roaring, refusing to give him back. "Help her!" someone finally shouted. Two men rushed forward, grabbing Lena's waist to keep her from slipping. With one final, desperate pull, Lena dragged the man toward the rocks. Water exploded as his body slammed against the shore. Silence followed. The man lay there, chest heaving, suit ruined, coughing up river water. Lena collapsed beside him, shaking, her hands bleeding, her chest rising and falling in harsh gasps. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the man turned his head slightly, eyes unfocused. He looked at Lena and whispered, barely audible, "Don't call anyone." Before she could ask what he meant, his eyes rolled back, and his body went limp. Panic rushed back in full force. "Get Nurse Denise!" someone shouted. "Bring him to the clinic!" Another said. Lena pushed herself up, despite the pain, and gently touched his shoulder. He was warm, alive. Her gaze dropped to his hand, still clenched even in unconsciousness. A heavy, expensive-looking ring glinted on his finger, strangely out of place in their poor village. His suit, though torn and soaked, was clearly tailored. City clothes, money clothes. Lena swallowed hard. Who was this man? As villagers lifted him carefully, Lena stood there shaking, staring at the river that almost took him, and at the stranger whose life now tangled with hers. She had no idea that pulling him from that water would pull her straight into a world she was never meant to enter. And the river, at last, calm, flowed on in silence, keeping its secrets for now. Lena sat on the wooden bench outside the village clinic, her hands wrapped in clean cloth. Nurse Denise had tied tightly around her palms. They throbbed with every heartbeat, but she barely felt the pain. Her eyes stayed fixed on the small clinic door. Inside, the stranger lay unconscious on a narrow bed, breathing shallow but steady. Nurse Denise moved quietly around him, checking his pulse, wiping river water from his face, murmuring to herself as she worked. "He's lucky," Denise said finally, stepping out. "Another few minutes in that river, and we wouldn't be talking." Lena let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Is he going to wake up?" "Yes," Denise replied. "But he needs rest, and answers." The word answers made Lena uneasy. By the time the sun dipped lower in the sky, the village had already started talking. People stood in small clusters, whispering, glancing toward the clinic, then toward Lena. "City man," one woman muttered. "Did you see that ring?" another whispered. "Trouble follows money," someone else said quietly. Lena tried to ignore them, but the weight of their stares pressed down on her chest. When Nurse Denise finally allowed Lena inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and damp clothes. The stranger lay on the bed, his suit folded nearby, clearly expensive, even ruined by river water. His face looked calmer now, almost peaceful. Then his eyelids fluttered. Lena froze. He opened his eyes slowly, confusion clouding them. His gaze drifted around the room before settling on her. "You're the girl," he said hoarsely. "Yes," Lena replied softly. "You're safe. You're in our village clinic." He tried to sit up and winced sharply, grabbing his side. "Don't move," Denise snapped gently. "You're injured." His eyes returned to Lena, sharp now, despite the pain. "Did anyone call the police?" "No," Lena said quickly. "You asked me not to." A flicker of relief crossed his face, followed immediately by tension. "Good," he murmured. "Please, keep it that way." Lena hesitated. "Why?" He didn't answer. Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. "What's your name?" Denise asked firmly. He paused too long. "Julian," he said at last. "Just Julian." Lena felt something tighten in her chest. Something about the way he said it felt incomplete, like a door half closed. Denise studied him carefully but didn't push. "You'll need to stay somewhere safe tonight. The clinic can't keep you long." "My house?" Lena said before she could stop herself. Denise raised an eyebrow. "Lena, he can't go back to the riverbank," Lena insisted. "He's weak, and people are already talking." Julian looked at her, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Lena replied. "But I won't leave someone I saved." That evening, Lena helped him walk slowly to her small wooden home at the edge of the village. Every step seemed to cost him effort. He leaned heavily on her arm, his weight unfamiliar and awkward, his presence strangely overwhelming. When Grandma Evelyn saw them, her face hardened instantly. "No," she said flatly. "Absolutely not." "He almost died, Grandma," Lena pleaded. "Just one night." Evelyn studied Julian's face closely, her sharp eyes narrowing. Something unreadable passed across her expression. Recognition, maybe, or fear. "One night," she said finally. "That's all." Later, as Julian lay resting on a thin mattress, Lena sat nearby, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Why were you in that river? She asked quietly. Julian stared at the ceiling. Because I was running. From what? He turned his head toward her, his expression guarded. From a life that doesn't forgive mistakes. Lena didn't fully understand, but she felt it. Outside, the village settled into uneasy night, and somewhere far beyond Rosewood Bend, a city searched for a man who was supposed to be untouchable, unaware that his fate now rested in the hands of a village girl who had saved him with nothing but a wooden stick and a brave heart. Morning came quietly to Rosewood Bend, but tension sat heavy in the air. Lena woke before the sun, the events of the previous day pressing on her chest like a weight. Her hands were stiff and sore as she moved around the small kitchen, preparing weak tea and porridge. From the corner of the room, Julian lay still on the thin mattress, his breathing slow and controlled. He opened his eyes as Lena set the cup down beside him. You didn't have to stay up all night, he said softly. I wanted to, Lena replied. You kept shifting like you were in pain. Julian hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. For everything. Before Lena could answer, the sound of a radio crackled to life outside. Grandma Evelyn had turned it on while sweeping the yard. A sharp voice cut through the morning air. Breaking news this morning. Billionaire heir Julian King has been reported missing after failing to appear at a scheduled board meeting yesterday. Lena froze. The spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered against the floor. Julian sat up too fast and winced, his face draining of color. The radio continued. Sources close to King Holdings say concerns are growing as his phone remains unreachable. Socialite Carmen St. James, believed to be close to Mr. King, has released a statement expressing worry. Lena's heart hammered as she slowly turned to Julian. Julian King? She whispered. Silence stretched between them. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. I didn't want you to find out like that. So it's true, she said, her voice shaking. You're that Julian. Yes. The word landed heavy. Lena stepped back, suddenly aware of how small the room felt. The ring she had found the night before sat hidden in her pocket, its weight burning against her skin. You're rich, she said quietly. Powerful. And hunted by expectations, Julian replied, which is why I needed to disappear, even for a moment. Before Lena could process his words, voices rose outside. Two men in clean button-down shirts and polished shoes stood near the edge of the road, holding clipboards and measuring tools. They smiled too easily. Good morning, one called out. We're doing a simple land assessment for future river improvements. Grandma Evelyn stiffened. What kind of improvements? She asked sharply. Development opportunities, the man replied smoothly. Better roads, better access. But first, we need signatures from homeowners. Lena watched Grandma's hands tremble as she tightened her grip on the broom. We don't need improvements, Grandma said. We need peace. The man's smile faltered just slightly. His eyes flicked past Grandma, toward the house. Julian watched from inside, tension radiating from him. They found me, he murmured. No, Lena said quickly. They don't know, not yet. But she wasn't sure she believed that. As the men moved on to the next house, village whispers grew louder. Phones came out. People stared openly now, glancing between Lena's house and the road. At the market later that morning, the radio played again. Carmen's voice echoed through the stalls, tearful and dramatic. Julian would never disappear without reason. Someone must have taken advantage of his kindness. Lena felt sick. That woman, Tiana whispered beside her. She looks fake. Nurse Denise pulled Lena aside. Be careful, she warned gently. City problems don't stay small. That afternoon, Lena confronted Julian. Those men, she said. They came right after the news. Julian nodded. Victor Hale. He doesn't need violence. He uses paper, courts, pressure. Why here? Lena asked. Because rivers mean land, Julian replied, and land means money. Grandma Evelyn suddenly spoke from the doorway. Because this village sits on something they've wanted before. Both Lena and Julian turned toward her. What do you mean? Lena asked. Grandma's face pale, she shook her head. Some doors should stay closed. But that night, as Lena helped Julian settle back onto the mattress, she reached into her pocket and finally pulled out the ring. This fell from your suit, she said. Julian's breath caught when he saw it. That ring, he whispered, was my father's. Lena's stomach tightened, and in that moment she knew with chilling certainty saving Julian from the river had not ended the danger. It had only brought it home. The decision was made before anyone said it out loud. Rosewood Bend felt different that morning, too quiet, like the village itself was holding its breath. Lena stood near the doorway, watching Julian struggle to sit upright. His color had improved, but pain still lingered in his movements, especially when he tried to hide it. You can't stay here, Grandma Evelyn said firmly, folding her arms. Not now. Julian didn't argue. He already knew. They'll keep coming, he said calmly, and the longer I'm here, the more attention this place gets. Lena swallowed. Where will you go? Before he could answer, a familiar black sedan rolled slowly into view, stopping at the edge of the dirt road. Darius stepped out, his posture alert, eyes scanning every corner of the village before settling on Julian. There you are, Darius said quietly. Relief flickered across his face. We need to leave, now. Julian nodded. Give me a moment. As he turned back to Lena, the distance between them suddenly felt enormous. I didn't plan for any of this, Julian said. But you saved my life. I won't forget that. Lena struggled to meet his gaze. Just don't let them hurt this place. I won't, he promised. I swear it. Grandma Evelyn handed Julian a folded cloth bag. For the road, she said shortly. Then softer, and for your conscience. Julian bowed his head respectfully. Thank you. When the car finally pulled away, Lena stood frozen, dust settling around her feet. The river flowed calmly in the distance, as if nothing had happened. No rescue, no secrets, no danger. But peace didn't last. By afternoon, Nurse Denise arrived in a hurry, worry etched across her face. Lena, she said quietly, pulling her aside, your grandmother's test results came back. Lena's heart dropped. Is she? She needs more scans, Denise replied carefully. City equipment, and soon. Grandma Evelyn waved it off with a weak smile. I'm fine, just tired. But Lena saw the truth in Denise's eyes. As if summoned by fear, the men with clipboards returned, this time with official-looking documents and a sharper tone. Final notice, one said politely. River zoning review. Properties here may be reclassified. What does that mean? Lena demanded. The man smiled thinly. It means ownership gets complicated. That night, Lena sat with Grandma, holding her hand. I'm going to the city, Lena said quietly. Grandma stiffened. No. I have to, Lena insisted. For your health, for the land, for answers. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Grandma spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Your mother went to that city once. Lena's breath caught. What happened? She came back broken, Grandma said, and pregnant, and scared. Lena's world tilted. Before she could ask more, Grandma squeezed her hand. Be careful, my child. The city takes more than it gives. At dawn, Lena packed a small bag. Tiana stood beside her, arms crossed. You're not going alone, Tiana said. I already told my aunt. Lena tried to smile. Thank you. As the bus pulled away from Rosewood Bend, Lena looked back at the river, at the place where everything changed. Hours later, the city rose before her like a wall of glass and steel. Towers stretched into the sky. Screens flashed faces and headlines. Her breath caught when she saw him. Julian's face stared down from a massive digital billboard. Billionaire, returns after disappearance. Lena's heart pounded. She stepped off the bus, small among the crowds, clutching her bag, and the weight of everything she carried. She had left the village as a girl who saved a stranger. She had arrived in the city as a girl walking straight into the storm. The city swallowed Lena whole. The moment she stepped onto the sidewalk, Rosewood Bend felt like a dream she'd woken up from too suddenly. Cars rushed past in endless streams. Horns blared. People moved fast, eyes forward, dressed in sharp clothes that made Lena acutely aware of her simple village dress and worn sandals. She clutched her small bag tighter. "Don't look down," Tiana muttered beside her. "Act like you belong." Lena nodded, even though her chest felt tight. Belong? Here? They stood across the street from the tallest glass building Lena had ever seen. It rose into the sky like it had no end, its surface reflecting the clouds, the sun, and the tiny figures of people below. "That's it," Tiana said softly. "King Holdings." Lena's heart began to race. Julian worked in there. The man she had pulled from the river with shaking hands and raw courage now ruled a world of steel and money. The thought made her dizzy. They crossed the street and approached the entrance. The glass doors slid open smoothly, cool air brushing Lena's face. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, shining walls, people walking with confidence and purpose. Before they could take 3 steps, a security guard stepped in front of them. "Can I help you?" he asked, already suspicious. "Yes," Lena said, forcing her voice steady. "We need to see Julian King." The guard blinked once, then laughed softly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Lena admitted. "But it's important." The guard's smile vanished. "Then you'll need to leave." Tiana bristled. "We came all the way from—" "Miss," the guard interrupted sharply, eyes scanning Lena's clothes. "Mr. King doesn't see walk-ins?" Heat flooded Lena's face. People nearby slowed, curious. She felt suddenly small, like she didn't belong in her own skin. "Please," Lena said quietly. "Just tell him Lena is here." The guard shook his head. "Step aside." They were gently but firmly ushered back outside. The glass doors slid shut between them and the world inside. Lena stood frozen, staring at her reflection in the glass, small, brown-skinned, village-born, invisible. "Don't cry," Tiana whispered urgently. "Not here." But Lena's eyes burned anyway. Before she could turn away, the doors opened again. A woman stepped out. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a cream-colored suit that looked like it cost more than Lena's entire life savings. Her hair was flawless. Her smile was sharp. Carmen St. James. She glanced at Lena once and stopped. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "Who are you?" Carmen asked, her tone polite but cold. Lena swallowed. "My name is Lena Harper." Carmen tilted her head slightly. "And why are you asking for Julian?" He knows me," Lena said carefully. Carmen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Julian knows a lot of people." At that exact moment, movement behind the glass caught Lena's attention. Julian stepped into the lobby. He was dressed in a tailored dark suit now, his hair neatly styled, his posture controlled. He looked nothing like the man who had gasped for breath on the riverbank. Then he saw her. Everything about him froze. The smile he was wearing vanished. His eyes locked onto Lena with something close to shock. "Julian?" Carmen called sweetly, following his gaze. He walked toward the doors, ignoring Carmen entirely. The guard stiffened as Julian pushed past him and stepped outside. "Lena," Julian said softly. Her heart skipped painfully. "You're alive," she breathed. "So are you," he replied. His gaze flicked briefly to Tiana, then back to Lena. "What are you doing here?" "I came for my grandmother," Lena said. "She's sick, and men are trying to take our land." Julian's jaw tightened. Carmen stepped closer, slipping her arm through Julian's. "Julian, the board is waiting," she said smoothly. Then she turned her attention back to Lena, eyes sharp. "You must be the village girl." Lena stiffened. "I have a name." Carmen's smile sharpened. "Of course you do." Julian gently but firmly removed Carmen's arm. "Lena, come inside, please." Gasps rippled among the nearby staff. Inside, Julian led Lena and Tiana through halls that felt endless. Everything was quiet, controlled. Lena felt like she was walking on glass. In a private office, Julian closed the door. "I didn't expect you to come here," he said honestly. "I didn't expect to need to," Lena replied. "But my grandmother needs help, and people are pressuring us." Julian rubbed his temples. "Victor's people." "Who?" Lena asked. "Someone who uses papers, not fists," Julian said. "And he doesn't lose." Julian pulled out his phone. "I'll cover the medical costs. All of them." Lena stepped back instantly. "No." Julian frowned. "Lena, I didn't save you so you could buy my dignity," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't be owned." Silence filled the room. Julian studied her for a long moment. "Then let me protect you another way." Outside the office, Carmen stood listening, her nails digging into her palm. Inside, Lena had no idea that by refusing Julian's money, she had made herself something far more dangerous in the city. She had become someone who couldn't be controlled, and the city did not like that at all. The office felt too quiet after Lena's words. Julian stood by the window, hands braced on the glass, staring out at the city that had never once asked him if he wanted it. Below, cars flowed like a living thing, fast, unstoppable, indifferent. "You think money always means ownership," he said finally, without turning around. Lena hugged her arms to her chest. "In my world, it usually does." Julian turned then, his expression serious, stripped of polish. "I didn't offer to pay because I think you're weak." "That's not how it feels," Lena replied. "Where I come from, help always comes with strings, and I won't have my grandmother thinking I sold myself to save her." Tiana, who had been quietly watching from the corner, cleared her throat. "Okay, I'm just going to say it. Pride is beautiful, but hospitals don't take pride as payment." Lena shot her a look, but her heart sank because she knew Tiana was right. Julian exhaled slowly. "Nurse Denise already sent the preliminary estimates. Your grandmother needs advanced scans, medication, and follow-up care. The numbers will keep climbing." Lena's throat tightened. "How much?" Julian hesitated just long enough to make her chest ache. "More than the village clinic, less than what this city wastes in a day." Lena looked down at her hands, the same hands that had bled, pulling him from the river. "Then what do you want from me?" Julian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a button on his desk. "Darius, hold all calls." A pause, then, "Understood." Julian returned to his seat, folding his hands together carefully, like every word mattered. "The truth," he said, "is that your presence already changed things. Cameras saw you, Carmen saw you, Victor's team is watching for weaknesses, and right now, you're the one thing I can't control, but also the one thing they can't predict." Lena frowned. "I don't understand." Julian leaned forward. "They expect me to act like a billionaire heir, predictable, polished, alone, but you don't fit their script." "And that helps me how?" Lena asked. "It protects you," he said softly. and your village. Lena shook her head. I didn't come here to be used as strategy. I know, Julian said quickly, which is why I'm giving you a choice. He slid a thin folder across the desk. Lena stared at it, dread curling in her stomach. What is this? A temporary arrangement, Julian said. Public, not private. You would stay here as my official guest, present at certain events, visible enough to stop rumors that I'm unstable or compromised. Tiana's eyes widened. You mean, like a fake relationship? Julian nodded once. In the public sense only. Strict boundaries. Your values remain yours. Lena pushed the folder away. No, Julian didn't flinch. Hear me out. I don't need to hear it, Lena said, standing. I didn't save you so I could pretend to be something I'm not. The door suddenly opened. Carmen walked in without knocking. Julian, the board. She stopped short when she saw Lena. Her smile froze, then reassembled. Oh, you're still here. Julian stood. Carmen, now's not the time. Carmen glanced at the folder on the desk. Interesting, she said lightly. You offering contracts to village girls now? Lena's face burned. Julian's voice hardened. Leave. Carmen laughed softly. You're making a mistake, Julian. Image matters. And she, her eyes flicked to Lena, is a liability. Lena straightened. I can hear you. Good, Carmen replied. Then hear this. The city doesn't reward innocence. It devours it. She turned and walked out, heels clicking like punctuation. Silence followed. Lena's hands trembled. This is what you want me to step into? Julian's jaw tightened. No, this is what's already here. Tiana stepped closer to Lena, lowering her voice. What did Nurse Denise say exactly? Lena swallowed. That Grandma's condition can be managed if we act now. If we wait... She didn't finish. Julian reached into a drawer and pulled out another envelope. This is the hospital's preliminary hold notice. They'll only keep her slot open for 48 hours. Lena's heart dropped. 48 hours. She thought of Grandma Evelyn's tired smile, of the village men measuring land like it meant nothing, of the river that had changed everything. I won't sleep in your bed, Lena said suddenly. I won't lie about who I am. I won't touch you for show. Julian met her gaze steadily. Agreed. I won't let anyone humiliate my family. They won't, Julian said. Not if you're with me. Lena laughed weakly. You make it sound like safety. It's not, Julian admitted. It's shelter in a storm. Tiana squeezed Lena's hand. You're not selling your soul, she whispered. You're buying time. Time. That was the word that broke her. Lena picked up the folder again, her fingers brushing the paper like it might burn her. This doesn't mean love, she said quietly. Julian's voice was just as soft. No, it means protection. Lena closed her eyes. When she signed, her hand shook, but her spine stayed straight. Julian watched her, something heavy and unspoken passing through his eyes. Outside the office, cameras flashed as the news broke. Inside, Lena Harper, the village girl who had once stood barefoot in the mud holding a wooden stick, had just stepped into a world that would test every promise she'd ever made to herself. And the city smiled, because it always smiled right before it tried to take everything. Lena barely slept that night. The bed she lay on was larger than her entire room back in Rosewood Bend, dressed in smooth white sheets that smelled faintly of lavender and something expensive she couldn't name. The ceiling above her was high, spotless, silent. No crickets, no distant river, no creaking wood, just quiet, too much quiet. She lay on her back, hands folded over her stomach, staring into the dark, her mind replaying the sound of her pen scratching across the paper as she signed Julian's name beside hers, not as a wife, not as a lover, but as something that felt dangerously close to both. A knock came softly at the door. Lena sat up instantly. "Yes?" The door opened just enough for Julian to step inside, careful, respectful, keeping his distance. He wasn't in a suit now, just a simple dark sweater and slacks. Somehow that made him feel more real and more dangerous to her heart. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "Darius said you hadn't eaten." "I'm not hungry," Lena replied quickly. Julian nodded as if he'd expected that. "Neither was I my first night here." She glanced around the room. "You live like this and still don't sleep?" A corner of his mouth lifted. "This place looks impressive, but it can be lonely." That surprised her. He gestured toward the window. "The city never rests. It just keeps asking things from you." Lena looked out. Lights stretched endlessly, glittering like a false sky. "Back home, when the river gets loud, you know a storm is coming," she said quietly. "Here it's always loud. How do you know when to prepare?" Julian watched her for a moment, something thoughtful passing through his eyes. "You don't," he said. "You just learn to endure." The next morning came too fast. Lena woke to voices outside her door, soft, efficient, moving with purpose. When she stepped into the hallway, a woman in a tailored navy suit smiled professionally. "Good morning, Miss Harper. I'm Elise. I'll be assisting you." "With what?" Lena asked warily. Elise gestured down the hall. "Wardrobe, schedule, media briefing." Lena's stomach tightened. "Media?" Before she could protest, she was guided into a room larger than her grandmother's house. Dresses hung neatly along one wall, shoes lined another. Everything looked untouched, waiting. "I can't wear these," Lena said, backing away. "They're just options," Elise replied gently. "Mr. King was very clear. Nothing that makes you uncomfortable." That helped, a little. Lena chose the simplest dress she could find. Soft fabric, modest cut, nothing that screamed wealth. Still, when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the girl staring back. She looked polished. That scared her. Downstairs, breakfast was already set. Julian stood when he saw her. "You don't have to stand," Lena said quickly. He smiled. "Habit." They ate in quiet for a few minutes until Lena finally asked, "What happens today?" Julian exhaled. "Today the city meets you." As if summoned by his words, Carmen appeared at the entrance to the dining area, flawless as ever, lips curved in a practiced smile. "So," she said lightly, eyes sweeping Lena from head to toe, "this is real." Julian's jaw tightened. "It is." Carmen stepped closer, circling Lena slowly. "You clean up nicely," she remarked. "Almost believable." Lena met her gaze calmly. "I don't need to be believable. I just need to be honest." Carmen laughed softly. "Honesty is expensive here. Most people can't afford it." She turned to Julian. "The board luncheon is at noon. Bringing her?" "Yes," Julian said. Carmen's smile hardened. "Of course you are." The luncheon was worse than Lena imagined. Long tables, quiet judgment, eyes that smiled but never warmed, conversations that stopped when she walked past, then restarted in whispers. "Who is she?" "From where?" "Temporary, I'm sure." Lena kept her back straight, her hands steady in her lap, even when a woman across from her asked, "So, Lena, what do your parents do?" "My grandmother raised me," Lena answered calmly. "And she's the strongest woman I know." The table fell quiet. Julian glanced at her, pride flickering in his eyes. Later, in the hallway, Lena finally let out the breath she'd been holding. "They think I don't belong," she said. "They're afraid you don't," Julian replied. That afternoon, Nurse Denise called. Lena's heart raced as she pressed the phone to her ear. They can fit your grandmother in for scans tomorrow, Denise said, but only if the paperwork clears today. Julian took the phone gently from Lena's shaking hand. I'll handle it, he said firmly. When the call ended, Lena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I didn't come here to be carried, she whispered. Julian stepped back, giving her space. Then don't be, he said. Stand beside me. That's all I ask. That evening, alone in her room again, Lena opened her bag and pulled out something small and familiar. A smooth stone from the riverbank. She turned it in her fingers, grounding herself. She hadn't lost who she was. She was still the girl who stood in the mud and refused to let go. But now, the river was made of glass and power and watching eyes, and she was learning, slowly, how to keep her footing before this world tried to sweep her away. The first crack came the next morning. Lena sensed it before anything actually happened. The way the air felt tighter, the way the staff's smiles looked rehearsed instead of kind, the way whispers followed her just a second longer than before. She was learning the city had a rhythm to its cruelty. Julian had left early for meetings, leaving Lena alone in the mansion, with her thoughts and a carefully printed schedule Elise had placed beside her breakfast tray. 11 a.m. Styling consultation, 1 p.m. Charity committee appearance, 6 p.m. King Foundation gala, attendance required. Attendance required. Lena stared at the words until they blurred. By noon, she sat in a sleek room while a stylist adjusted her hair, her hands gentle but efficient. You have very natural beauty, the woman said kindly. We won't change much. Please don't, Lena replied quickly. I don't want to look like someone else. The stylist smiled softly. That's wise. But wisdom didn't protect her at the charity committee. The room was filled with well-dressed women and men sipping sparkling water, speaking about generosity as if it were a concept instead of a necessity. Lena sat beside Julian, her posture careful, her hands folded. A woman across the table tilted her head, eyes sharp with curiosity. So, Lena, she said lightly, what school did you attend? Julian stiffened beside her. Lena answered before he could. The public school in my village. The woman's smile flickered. Oh, how humble, another voice chimed in. And before that, boarding school, private tutor? No, Lena said calmly. Just school. A few chuckles followed, soft, polite, cruel. Julian leaned forward. Lena's intelligence doesn't come from privilege, he said evenly. It comes from resilience. The room quieted, but the looks didn't soften. After the meeting, Lena excused herself to the restroom and locked herself in a stall. Her chest tightened as the weight of it all pressed down. They didn't need to shout. They didn't need to insult her outright. They made her feel small with smiles and questions. She washed her face, staring at her reflection. The girl in the mirror looked composed, but her eyes carried a storm. I won't break, she told herself. The gala that evening was worse. The venue glowed with lights and glass and gold. Cameras flashed as Julian arrived, his arm bent slightly, an unspoken invitation. Lena hesitated. Take it, Julian murmured. Only if you want to. She slipped her arm through his. The moment they stepped onto the carpet, whispers exploded. Cameras zoomed in. Who is she? Is this serious? She looks so ordinary. Julian's grip tightened just enough to steady her. Inside, champagne flowed and laughter rang too loud. Lena felt eyes on her from every direction, measuring, judging. Then she saw Carmen. She stood near the center of the room, radiant in a dramatic gown, surrounded by admirers. When her eyes met Lena's, her smile sharpened. She glided over like a queen approaching a challenger. Well, Carmen said smoothly, you made it. Lena inclined her head politely. Good evening. Carmen's gaze swept over her dress. Interesting choice. Very restrained. I like to be comfortable, Lena replied. Carmen laughed softly. Comfort is a luxury, darling, especially here. She turned to Julian. A word. Julian shook his head. Anything you want to say, you can say here. Carmen's eyes glittered. Of course. Lena, everyone is dying to know more about you. I'm not much of a mystery, Lena said. That's not what people are saying, Carmen replied sweetly. They're wondering how a village girl captured the attention of one of the most powerful men in the city. The circle around them grew quieter. Julian's jaw tightened. That's enough. But Lena spoke first. I didn't capture anyone, she said clearly. I met Julian when he needed help. I gave it. That's all. Carmen tilted her head. How noble, but surely there must be more. No, Lena said. Sometimes people help each other without expecting anything. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Carmen smiled, but her eyes were cold. That's a lovely story, but stories like that don't usually last in this world. Before Lena could respond, a waiter stumbled nearby, a glass tipping. Wine splashed down the front of Lena's dress. Gasps erupted. Oh my goodness, Carmen exclaimed, placing a hand to her chest. How careless. The waiter apologized profusely, flustered and shaking. Lena looked down at the spreading stain. Her first instinct was to disappear. Then she remembered the river, the mud, the stick in her hands. She straightened. It's all right, Lena said calmly to the waiter. It's just a dress. Carmen blinked, caught off guard. Julian stepped forward. We'll step outside. No, Lena said quietly. Both Julian and Carmen looked at her. I won't leave, Lena continued, her voice steady. I didn't do anything wrong. Silence fell. Julian studied her, something fierce and proud crossing his face. He nodded once and stayed. Carmen's smile slipped. The rest of the evening passed in tension. Lena felt the weight of every stare, every whisper, but she didn't retreat. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, Julian finally spoke. You didn't have to endure that, he said. I know, Lena replied, but if I run every time they try to embarrass me, they'll keep chasing. Julian watched her carefully. You're stronger than you realize. She let out a shaky breath. I'm just tired. Julian's phone buzzed. He frowned as he read the message. Victor has filed an emergency motion, he said. About the Riverland. Lena's heart dropped. Already? Yes, Julian said grimly. He's moving fast. As if the night hadn't taken enough, Lena's phone rang moments later. It was Nurse Denise. Lena answered instantly. Hello? Lena, Denise said gently. Your grandmother's numbers, they're not great. We need to proceed quickly. The world tilted. Lena leaned against the railing, the city lights blurring. I'm coming, she whispered. I promise. When the call ended, Julian was beside her in an instant. She needs me, Lena said, voice breaking, and I'm standing here pretending I belong. Julian shook his head. You're not pretending. You're fighting. Lena looked out over the city, the glass towers, the flashing lights, the watching eyes. The river had tried to pull him under. This place tried to pull her apart. And as the night closed in, Lena understood one thing clearly. The city would keep testing her dignity, and she would have to decide, again and again, whether to bend or stand exactly where she was. Lena stood at the hospital window, watching the city wake up. Below, ambulances came and went. Nurses moved quickly, purpose written into every step. The air smelled like disinfectant and urgency, sharp, unforgiving. Somewhere down the hall, machines beeped steadily, counting time in a way that made Lena's chest tighten. Grandma Evelyn lay asleep behind her, thinner than Lena remembered, her breathing shallow but steady. Tubes ran into her arm. The woman who had raised Lena with iron strength and quiet wisdom looked fragile now, like the world had finally asked too much of her. Nurse Denise adjusted a chart near the bed. "She's stable," she said gently, "but the scans confirm it. We can't delay much longer." Lena nodded, gripping the strap of her bag. "How long do we have?" Denise hesitated. "Weeks, maybe less if the stress continues." Stress. Lena almost laughed. Stress had been her shadow since the river. When Denise stepped out, Lena sat beside Grandma and took her hand. It felt cooler than it should have. "I'm here," Lena whispered. "I didn't forget you. I won't." Grandma's eyes fluttered open briefly. "You look tired," she murmured. Lena smiled softly. "I'm all right." Grandma studied her face, then sighed. "The city is heavy, isn't it?" Lena swallowed. "It is." Grandma squeezed her hand weakly. "Remember who you are. Don't let them dress you up and take your voice." "I won't," Lena promised. By mid-morning, Julian arrived. He didn't come in a suit this time. Just dark jeans, a pressed shirt, no cameras, no entourage. He paused at the doorway when he saw Grandma, respect written across his face. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "She's my home," Lena replied. Outside the room, Julian lowered his voice. "Victor's motion is moving faster than expected. He's pushing for immediate land evaluation near the river." Lena's stomach dropped. "That land is our village." "I know," Julian said. "Which is why we need evidence, something to slow him down." "Evidence of what?" Lena asked. Julian hesitated. "Of how aggressively he's been operating, of corners being cut." Lena thought of the journal pages, the half-burned documents, the men with clipboards who smiled too easily. "The river," she said suddenly. "That's where they started measuring first." Julian studied her. "You think there's something there?" "I know there is," Lena said. "Things don't circle back for no reason." By afternoon, they were on the road. No press, no announcements. Just Julian, Lena, Darius driving, and Tiana squeezed into the back seat with Lena, eyes sharp and restless. As the city faded behind them, Lena felt her shoulders relax for the first time in days. "Crazy," Tiana muttered. "I never thought a bus ride back home would feel like relief." When Rosewood Bend came into view, Lena's heart tightened. The river shimmered under the sun, calm now, almost innocent. Children played near the bank. Women washed clothes. Life continued, unaware of the storm circling just beyond its edges. But something was wrong. A new sign stood near the water. Survey in progress. Authorized personnel only. Lena's jaw clenched. "They're not wasting time," Julian said quietly. They walked toward the riverbank, careful not to draw attention. Darius stayed back, scanning, alert but unobtrusive. Near the rocks where Lena had pulled Julian out weeks ago, fresh markers had been driven into the soil, painted lines traced paths that didn't belong there. "This wasn't here before," Lena said. Julian crouched, examining one of the markers. "Temporary, rushed." Tiana pointed toward a pile of discarded materials near the bushes. "What about that?" They approached carefully. Among the trash were rolled blueprints, damp but readable. Julian unfolded one slowly, his eyes darkened. "This outlines a preliminary access route," he said, "filed before proper approval." "Meaning?" Lena asked. "Meaning Victor is acting like permission is already guaranteed," Julian replied. "That's a violation." Lena felt a spark of hope, but it dimmed quickly. "Is it enough?" Julian exhaled. "Not on its own." As if summoned by tension, footsteps approached. Reverend Marcus appeared from the path, his expression grave. "I heard you were back," he said softly, eyes flicking to Julian. "I was hoping I was wrong." "Pastor," Lena said. You knew, didn't you? Marcus sighed. About the land? About your mother? About how these things always return? Lena's chest tightened. You know more. I know this, Marcus said carefully. Your mother didn't just leave the city. She was pressured, quietly, legally. Julian stiffened. By who? Marcus met his gaze. People connected to your family's old development arm. The words hit like a slap. Julian shook his head. My father shut that division down years ago. Yes, Marcus said, after damage was done. Lena's knees felt weak. My mother? She worked for them? She helped manage community relations, Marcus said. She believed in protecting places like Rosewood Bend. And they punished her for it, Lena whispered. Marcus nodded. They made her disappear without a scandal. No fists, just paperwork. Julian's face tightened with guilt he hadn't earned, but felt anyway. I didn't know, he said quietly. I believe you, Lena replied, but that doesn't erase what happened. A shout interrupted them. Hey, you can't be here! One of the survey men approached, clipboard in hand, irritation sharp in his voice. Julian straightened. We're just passing through. The man squinted. This area's restricted. Lena stepped forward. Since when? Since authorization was granted, he said curtly. Lena smiled, slow, deliberate. By who? The man hesitated. Julian took out his phone calmly. Could you repeat your name for the record? The man's face tightened. No recording allowed. Julian nodded. Interesting. The man backed off, muttering, retreating faster than he had approached. Tiana let out a breath. They're scared. They should be, Julian said, but fear makes people reckless. As the sun dipped lower, Lena knelt near the water, fingers brushing the same rock she'd braced herself against that day. This river tried to take you, she said quietly to Julian. Now they're trying to take it. Julian watched her. And you're still standing in front of it. Lena looked up. Because some things are worth holding on to, no matter how strong the current. That night, back at Grandma's house, Lena opened her mother's journal again. Tucked inside the spine, something she'd missed before, was a folded document. Her breath caught as she read it. A notarized statement, partial land acknowledgement, her mother's name. This changes things, Julian said slowly. It proves my mother had standing here, Lena whispered, that she wasn't just passing through. It gives us leverage, Julian replied. Hope flickered, small but real. But as Lena closed the journal, unease crept in, because outside, a car engine idled briefly before driving away, and somewhere between the river and the city, someone was watching, very carefully, waiting to see what Lena Harper would do next. The river flowed on, and this time, Lena was ready to fight the current. The trouble didn't announce itself loudly. It slipped in quietly, the way the city always did, through headlines, polite smiles, and sealed envelopes. Lena first felt it the morning after they returned from Rosewood Bend. She woke early in the guest room, sunlight spilling across the floor. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then her phone buzzed, once, twice, then non-stop. Messages, missed calls, notifications stacking on top of each other. Her chest tightened. She opened the first alert. Breaking, billionaire heir's fiancé under scrutiny. Questions raised about her past. Lena's hands went cold. Another headline followed. Sources claim village girl may have hidden motives. Then another. Was the river rescue a setup? Her breath hitched. Tiana burst into the room without knocking, phone in hand, eyes blazing. They're doing it. I told you they would. Lena sat up slowly. Doing what? Framing the narrative. Tiana snapped. Look. She scrolled and shoved the phone toward Lena. A grainy photo filled the screen, Lena standing by the riverbank weeks ago, taken from far away. The caption beneath it read, "Witnesses claim the chance rescue that brought Lena Harper into Julian King's life may not have been accidental." Lena stared at the screen, disbelief flooding her. "That's not true," she whispered. "Of course it's not," Tiana said. "But truth isn't what they're selling." Downstairs, the atmosphere felt different. Staff moved with careful politeness. Conversation stopped when Lena entered a room, then resumed in hushed tones after she passed. Julian stood by the window in the main sitting area, phone pressed to his ear, his expression dark. "No," he said sharply. "You don't get to run that without verification. I don't care who approved it." He ended the call and turned to Lena immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "This started faster than I expected." "Victor?" Lena asked. Julian nodded. "And Carmen." As if summoned by her name, Carmen appeared in the doorway, flawless as ever, carrying a tablet. "Julian," she said smoothly, "we need to talk." Julian crossed his arms. "Anything you have to say, you can say here." Carmen's eyes flicked to Lena. "This concerns her." "Then she stays," Julian replied firmly. Carmen sighed dramatically. "You're being emotional." "No," Julian said. "I'm being fair." Carmen turned her attention fully to Lena, her smile thin. "You must understand how this looks." Lena met her gaze. "How what looks?" "A young woman from nowhere suddenly appearing in Julian's life. A rescue story that benefits her enormously." Carmen tilted her head. "People ask questions." "I didn't ask for anything," Lena said quietly. Carmen tapped her tablet. "Yet here you are." Julian stepped forward. "Enough! You crossed a line." Carmen shrugged. "The city decides lines, Julian, not us." She turned and left, heels clicking softly against the marble. Lena's throat burned. "I should go," she said suddenly. Julian looked at her sharply. "Go where?" "Anywhere but here," Lena replied. "I won't let your name burn because of me." Julian shook his head. "This isn't about you leaving. This is about them trying to scare you into silence." "I don't belong here," Lena whispered. "They're making that clear." Julian's voice softened. "Belonging isn't something they get to decide." Before Lena could answer, Darius entered, expression serious. "There's more," he said. "A formal inquiry has been filed. They want to review Lena's background." Lena felt dizzy. "Review how?" Julian exhaled slowly. "Schools, work history, family records." "My grandmother," Lena said, fear flashing through her eyes. "They won't touch her," Julian said firmly. "I won't allow it." But Lena knew better. Once the city started digging, it never stopped where you wanted it to. That afternoon, Lena insisted on going out alone. She needed air, space, proof that she was still herself. She dressed simply and slipped out through a side entrance, walking until the noise of the city dulled into a steady hum. She stopped at a small cafe, ordering tea she barely tasted. Two women at a nearby table whispered, glancing her way. "That's her." "She doesn't look special." "They never do." Lena's hands trembled around the cup. She stood abruptly and left. By the time she returned to the mansion, a courier was waiting. "Delivery for Lena Harper," he said. Julian took the envelope before she could. Inside was a printed article draft, unpublished but ready. At the bottom, a note. "Withdraw quietly. This ends cleanly." Lena stared at the words. "They're offering you peace," Julian said bitterly, "on their terms." Lena felt something settle inside her, not fear, but resolve. "No," she said. Julian looked at her. "No?" "No," Lena repeated. "I didn't survive the river to drown quietly in lies." That evening, Lena called Nurse Denise. "They asked for additional paperwork," Denise said carefully. "Things are slowing." Lena closed her eyes. They're pressuring you. Yes, Denise admitted, but I'm not backing down. Thank you, Lena whispered. After the call, Lena went to Julian's study. I want to speak, she said. Julian looked up. Speak where? To them, Lena replied. The media, the board, whoever's listening. Julian's jaw tightened. They'll tear you apart. Only if I let them define me, Lena said. She pulled out her mother's journal and the folded document. They erased her quietly, Lena continued. I won't let them erase me the same way. Julian studied her for a long moment, pride and worry warring in his eyes. If you do this, he said, there's no stepping back. I know, Lena replied. That night, as the city buzzed with rumors and speculation, Lena stood at the window once more. She thought of the river, how it didn't ask who you were or where you came from. It only tested how firmly you stood. Tomorrow she would speak, not as Julian King's fiancée, not as a scandal, but as Lena Harper, the girl who held her ground when the current tried to pull her under. The morning Lena chose to speak, the city felt colder, not in temperature, but in the way eyes followed her, in the way the air seemed to wait, sharp and expectant. From the moment she stepped into the living room, dressed simply in a soft, neutral dress with no jewelry except the thin bracelet Grandma Evelyn had once given her, she knew there would be no turning back. Julian stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, giving final instructions. When he saw Lena, he ended the call immediately. You don't have to do this, he said quietly for the third time. Lena shook her head. I do. If I stay silent, they get to tell my story forever. Julian studied her face, the calm resolve there, the quiet strength that had first shocked him by the river. He nodded slowly. Then I'll stand beside you. Downstairs, the press room buzzed with low conversation. Cameras were already set up. Reporters whispered, eyes bright with anticipation. This wasn't a charity announcement or a business update. This was blood in the water. Victor had made sure of that. Lena could feel it. The hunger for scandal. The eagerness to tear something pure apart just to see what fell out. Her hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together, grounding herself. Breathe, she told herself, like you did by the river. When Julian and Lena entered the room together, the noise exploded. Mr. King, is the engagement real? Who is Lena Harper? Was the river rescue staged? Julian lifted a hand. The room slowly quieted. I asked you here today, Julian began, his voice firm, because lies spread fastest in silence. He turned slightly toward Lena, and because the person most affected deserves to speak for herself. Every camera swung toward her. Lena stepped forward. For a moment, fear tried to climb her throat. She saw the faces, skeptical, curious, amused, cruel. She saw Carmen standing at the back, arms crossed, lips curved in a knowing smile. She saw Victor near the side, composed, confident, certain this room would finish what he had started. Then Lena thought of Grandma Evelyn in her hospital bed. She thought of the river, and she spoke. My name is Lena Harper, she said clearly. I'm not a strategist. I'm not an actress. I'm not a trap. A murmur rippled through the room. I grew up in Rosewood Bend, Lena continued, a small village by the river. I was raised by my grandmother. I went to public school. I worked. I lived a simple life. She paused, letting the words settle. The day I met Julian King, I didn't know his name. I didn't know his wealth. I didn't know what his face looked like on a screen. She lifted her hands slightly, showing faint scars along her palms. I knew one thing. A man was drowning. The room went still. I didn't plan to save him, Lena said. I reacted. I grabbed the nearest stick. I held on. Because that's what you do when someone is dying in front of you. She looked directly into the cameras. If helping someone survive is manipulation, she said quietly, then we need to ask ourselves what kind of world we live in. A reporter raised a hand. Miss Harper, critics say your relationship with Mr. King conveniently began after that rescue. Lena nodded. Yes, because that's when we met. A few nervous laughs scattered through the room. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for protection. I didn't ask to be here, Lena continued. I came to the city because my grandmother is sick, because men with clipboards came to our village and started measuring land like people didn't live there. Victor's jaw tightened. Lena reached into her folder and held up a document. My mother once worked in this city, she said. She believed in protecting communities like mine. She was pressured to leave quietly, no scandal, no headlines, just paperwork. Julian's breath caught. I won't let the same thing happen to me, Lena said firmly. I won't disappear to make powerful people comfortable. The room buzzed now, whispers, shifting seats, rapid note-taking. Julian stepped forward then. There are claims that Lena Harper orchestrated her encounter with me, he said coolly. Those claims are false. He gestured toward the screen behind them. Images appeared, timestamps, river photos, independent witness statements. These are records from Rosewood Bend, Julian continued. Witnesses, time-stamped footage. The rescue occurred before any public knowledge of my disappearance. Victor stepped forward suddenly. With all due respect, he said smoothly, emotion doesn't equal innocence. Julian's eyes hardened. No, but evidence does. Gasps filled the room as Julian turned the screen again, this time displaying survey documents, rushed filings, and unauthorized land assessments near the river. Victor Hale, Julian said evenly, has been pursuing aggressive development in Rosewood Bend without full approval. The same development my father's company abandoned years ago due to ethical concerns. Victor's smile slipped. This press conference isn't about romance, Julian continued. It's about truth, and about how quickly people assume a woman from nothing must be after something. The silence was deafening. Lena felt something shift, like the current changing direction. After the conference, chaos erupted. Phones rang. Reporters shouted questions. Carmen disappeared without a word. Her composure cracked. Victor left swiftly, jaw tight, already calculating his next move. Back upstairs, Lena collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion flooding her limbs. I think I might throw up, she muttered weakly. Tiana handed her water, eyes shining. Girl, you just walked into a room full of wolves and made them listen. Julian crouched in front of Lena. You were incredible. I was terrified, Lena admitted. That doesn't cancel courage, Julian said softly. A knock came at the door. Darius stepped in, his expression unreadable. The board is split, but Victor lost ground, and the land case, there's a temporary halt pending investigation. Lena exhaled shakily. That night, Lena sat alone on the balcony. The city lights no longer looked like a wall. They looked smaller, less powerful. Julian joined her quietly. You changed things today, he said. Lena shook her head. I just told the truth. Julian studied her. That's what changes things. Lena rested her arms on the railing, staring out at the city she had once feared. I used to think strength meant surviving quietly, she said. Now I know it also means speaking, even when your voice shakes. Julian watched her, something deep and certain settling in his chest. The city hadn't swallowed her. It had tried, and failed. But far away, in a quiet office lit by a single desk lamp, Victor Hale stared at a screen replaying Lena's speech. His lips curled slowly into a thin smile. Interesting, he murmured. The game wasn't over, and Lena Harper had just stepped onto the board. not as a piece to be moved, but as a force the city would have to reckon with. The silence after the storm felt heavier than the storm itself. Lena woke late the next morning, her body aching in places she hadn't known could ache. Not from physical strain, but from the kind of exhaustion that settles deep into the bones after fear, courage, and truth have all collided at once. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the city came back to her. The height of the ceilings, the distant hum of traffic, the unfamiliar softness of the bed, and with it, the memory of standing before cameras, of saying her name out loud like a declaration. She sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her chest, breathing. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. It was Julian. He looked tired, too, his usually composed face marked with shadows beneath his eyes. He carried 2 cups of tea, setting one on the table beside her. "You disappeared after last night," he said gently. "I needed quiet," Lena replied. "My head was too loud." Julian nodded. "Mine too." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping tea, the kind of silence that didn't rush to be filled. Finally, Lena spoke. "Did I make things worse?" Julian looked at her, surprised. "No. I mean for you," she said. "For the company, for everything you've built." Julian leaned back in the chair, studying the ceiling. "What I built was always standing on things I didn't question enough. You didn't weaken it. You exposed what needed to be fixed." Lena absorbed that slowly. "There's something else," Julian continued. "Something the board didn't want to discuss yesterday." Lena's stomach tightened. "About the land?" "Yes, and about your mother." Lena set her cup down carefully. "Then tell me." They moved to Julian's study, a room that had once intimidated Lena, but now felt strangely neutral, just a place where truth lived or didn't. Julian opened a file on his tablet and turned the screen toward her. "My father shut down the development arm connected to Rosewood Bend years ago," he said. "Officially, it was due to shifting priorities. Unofficially," he hesitated, "there were internal reports, complaints, objections raised by someone in community relations." Lena's breath caught. "My mother," Julian nodded. "She argued that the project would displace families, damage the river ecosystem, and create long-term harm. She documented everything." Lena closed her eyes. The image of her mother, soft-spoken, determined, rose in her mind. A woman who believed that words could protect people. "What happened to her?" Lena asked. Julian's voice lowered. "She was told the project was inevitable, that if she didn't cooperate, she would be reassigned quietly. Her reports were buried. Her access was revoked." "And she left," Lena whispered. "Yes," Julian said, "but not before signing something." He pulled out a scanned document. Lena leaned forward, her heart pounding as she read her mother's name. The words blurred slightly through tears. "It's a conditional acknowledgement," Julian explained. "Not full ownership, but proof she had standing. Proof she wasn't just an employee, she was a stakeholder in protecting that land." Lena's hands trembled. "She never told me." "She might not have been allowed to," Julian said softly. A sharp knock interrupted them. Darius entered, his expression serious. "We need to talk." Julian straightened. "What is it?" "Victor," Darius said. "He's not pushing publicly right now. He's pivoting." Lena frowned. "Pivoting how?" "He's leaning into the board," Darius replied. "Playing the long game, framing this as emotional distraction, reputational risk. He's also filed a quiet petition regarding guardianship rights over certain development-adjacent families." Lena stiffened. "Guardianship?" Julian's face hardened. "He's trying to destabilize communities by questioning their legal structures. If he can make families look unorganized or unprotected, it strengthens his case." That includes my village, Lena said. Yes, Julian confirmed, and potentially your grandmother. Fear surged through Lena. He wouldn't touch her directly, Julian said, but pressure comes in many forms. As if summoned by dread, Lena's phone rang. She answered immediately. Hello? Nurse Denise's voice came through, calm but tense. Lena, I wanted to let you know before you heard it elsewhere. The hospital administration received inquiries this morning. Lena's heart dropped. About my grandmother? Yes, Denise said. Nothing illegal, just questions, funding sources, family arrangements. Julian closed his eyes briefly. I'm so sorry, Denise continued. I reassured them, but things like this don't happen by accident. I understand, Lena said quietly. Thank you for telling me. After the call ended, Lena sat very still. They're using her, she said. Julian crouched in front of her. They're trying to scare you. It's working, Lena admitted. I don't care what they say about me, but my grandmother, she didn't choose this. Julian's voice was steady. Then we protect her, properly, legally, publicly. How? Lena asked. Julian stood. By doing what the city hates most. He met her gaze. We slow down. The next few days unfolded in a strange rhythm. The headlines softened slightly, no longer vicious but cautious. The board postponed votes. The land case remained frozen under review. On the surface, things looked calmer. Underneath, everything was moving. Julian arranged for an independent legal advocate to review Rosewood Ben's claims. Not connected to King Holdings, not influenced by Victor. Lena insisted on attending every meeting, even when exhaustion dragged at her limbs. I won't be talked about in rooms I'm not allowed into, she said firmly. Julian didn't argue. One afternoon, Lena returned to the hospital to sit with Grandma Evelyn. The older woman looked frail but alert, her sharp eyes still very much alive. I saw you on the television, Grandma said softly. Lena winced. I'm sorry. Grandma smiled faintly. You stood straight. Lena took her hand. I was scared. Good, Grandma replied. Means you care. There was a pause. Your mother would have done the same, Grandma added. Lena swallowed. Why didn't you tell me everything? Grandma sighed. Because I wanted you to live light, not carry her battles before you were ready. And now? Lena asked. Grandma squeezed her hand. Now you're ready. That night, Lena sat alone in her room, her mother's journal open on her lap. She read slowly, carefully, as if every word mattered more now. One passage caught her breath. If my child ever returns to the river, it means the fight came back. And if it did, I hope she knows this. Standing still is also a choice. Lena closed the journal, tears slipping down her cheeks. She wasn't standing still anymore. The next morning, Julian received a message that made his jaw tighten. Victor had requested a private mediation session, with Lena present. They want to talk, Julian said. Lena's pulse quickened. Why now? Because you didn't disappear, Julian replied, and because slowing things down cost him leverage. Lena exhaled slowly. Then I'll go. Julian studied her. You don't have to face him alone. I won't, Lena said, but I won't hide either. The mediation took place in a neutral office overlooking the city. Victor sat across from them, composed, polite, his smile carefully measured. Miss Harper, he said smoothly, you've made quite an impression. Lena met his gaze evenly. So have you. Victor chuckled. I admire conviction, truly. But conviction without experience can be dangerous. And experience without conscience is worse, Lena replied calmly. Julian's lips twitched. Victor leaned back. You want to protect your village, your grandmother, your legacy. I want progress. Progress for who? Lena asked. Victor didn't answer directly. There are ways to ensure everyone walks away comfortable. Lena folded her hands. I'm not interested in comfort. I'm interested in fairness. Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll see how long that holds. When the meeting ended, Julian exhaled sharply. That was a warning. Yes, Lena said. And an invitation. To what? Julian asked. To underestimate me, Lena replied quietly. That night, as Lena stood by the window once more, she realized something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer reacting. She was choosing. The city had tried to rewrite her story, quietly, cruelly, efficiently. But Lena Harper had learned what her mother once knew. Power didn't always roar. Sometimes it waited, and when it moved, it did so with purpose. The river outside Rosewood Bend still flowed, and somewhere between its steady current and the restless city lights, Lena stood, no longer just surviving the storm, but shaping what came after. The night after the mediation, Lena couldn't sleep. The city lights outside her window pulsed like a living thing, restless and watchful. Somewhere below, cars moved endlessly, people chased deadlines, deals were made, lives were altered without a single pause to consider who would feel the consequences. Victor's voice echoed in her mind. Conviction without experience can be dangerous. Lena sat up in bed, clutching her mother's journal against her chest. He was wrong. Conviction without courage was dangerous. But conviction rooted in truth, that was power. Still, power had a cost, and Lena was beginning to understand she was about to be asked to pay it. By morning, the house was buzzing. Phones rang. Assistants moved briskly. Darius spoke in low, urgent tones near the staircase. Julian stood at the kitchen island, scrolling through documents, his jaw set. Lena stepped into the room, barefoot, her hair pulled back simply. The noise softened when she entered. Julian looked up immediately. You should eat something. I will later, Lena said. What's happening? Darius answered before Julian could. Victor has requested an emergency board session. This afternoon. Julian exhaled slowly. He's forcing a vote. A vote on what? Lena asked. On restructuring, Darius replied, which includes land assets connected to Rosewood Bend. Lena felt the air leave her lungs. Already? He's framing it as risk management, Julian said. He's arguing that the controversy surrounding you has made the land a liability. Lena straightened. So this is my fault? No, Julian said sharply. This is his excuse. But I'm the weapon he's using, Lena said quietly. Julian met her gaze, something raw flickering in his eyes. You're not a weapon. You're the reason he's exposed. That doesn't stop him from hurting people, Lena replied. Silence settled between them. Then Lena said the words that had been forming in her chest all night. I'll step back. Julian's head snapped up. No. If I remove myself, Lena continued steadily, he loses his leverage. The headlines calm. The board breathes. The village gets time. Julian moved toward her. You don't get to sacrifice yourself to fix a system that's broken. Lena's voice didn't waver. I get to choose what I give. Tiana, who had been listening from the doorway, shook her head fiercely. Lena, no, that's exactly what they want. Not the way I'll do it, Lena replied. Julian stared at her, disbelief mixing with fear. You think disappearing will protect you? I don't mean disappearing, Lena said. I mean stepping forward, on my own terms. 2 hours later, Lena stood alone in a quiet conference room. No cameras, no Julian beside her, no shield. Victor sat across from her, looking mildly impressed. You came, he said, alone. Yes, Lena replied. Victor folded his hands. Bold, foolish, hard to tell the difference sometimes. Lena leaned forward. You want me out of the picture? Victor smiled. I want stability. No, Lena said calmly. You want silence. Victor didn't deny it. I'll give you something better, Lena continued. Clarity. She slid a folder across the table. Victor raised an eyebrow and opened it. Inside were copies of her mother's documents, witness statements from Rosewood Bend, and a signed letter from the independent legal advocate Julian had arranged, confirming procedural misconduct in the early survey filings. Victor's smile faded slightly. This goes public, Lena said, if the board vote proceeds today. Victor studied her with new interest. You're bluffing. Lena shook her head. I'm tired. Victor laughed softly. You think you can control timing? No, Lena replied, but I can choose impact. She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. You push this vote, and I speak again. Not about romance, not about drama, about land theft, about intimidation, about how quietly people like you erase communities. Victor leaned back slowly. And if I don't? He asked. Then I step back from Julian publicly, Lena said. No engagement, no alliance, no distraction. Victor's eyes narrowed. You'd walk away from power? I never wanted it, Lena said simply. I wanted protection for my people. Silence stretched between them. Victor tapped his finger once on the table. You're more dangerous than I expected, he said finally. Lena stood. So are rivers. The board meeting was delayed. Officially, it was due to unresolved documentation concerns. Unofficially, everyone knew something had shifted. Julian found Lena in the garden behind the house, sitting on a stone bench, staring at nothing. What did you do? He asked quietly. Lena looked up at him, her eyes tired but clear. I bought time. Julian ran a hand through his hair. At what cost? Lena swallowed. I told Victor I would step away from you publicly. Julian went very still. What? He said. I didn't promise to leave, Lena clarified. I promised not to be his excuse. Julian's voice dropped. You think I can just watch you erase yourself? I'm not erasing myself, Lena said. I'm refusing to be shaped by them. Julian knelt in front of her, his voice breaking through his composure for the first time. Lena, I don't want protection that costs you. Lena touched his hand gently. And I don't want love that costs my people. The words hung between them, heavy, painful, honest. That evening, the announcement went out. Julian King and Lena Harper confirm they are taking time apart to focus on personal and professional matters. The headlines shifted instantly. Speculation replaced outrage. Interest dulled. Victor's leverage weakened. But Lena felt the loss like a physical ache. She moved back into a smaller guest wing. No shared meals. No quiet late-night conversations. Just distance that hurt worse because it was chosen. At the hospital, Grandma Evelyn watched the news quietly. They think you're stepping back, she said softly. I am, Lena replied. Grandma reached for her hand. From noise, not from truth. Lena smiled faintly. You always know. Grandma squeezed her fingers. Your mother did the same thing once. She walked away so others could stand. Lena closed her eyes. Did it hurt? Yes, Grandma said honestly, but she never regretted it. Days passed. The land case stalled further. Investigations deepened. Victor's name appeared less in public and more in legal memos. Lena stayed mostly out of sight, working quietly with community advocates, reviewing documents, attending meetings without cameras. Julian respected the distance, but it cost him. They passed each other sometimes in hallways, exchanging small smiles that carried too much unsaid. At night, Julian stared at his phone, wanting to call her, knowing he shouldn't. One evening, Lena returned from the hospital to find an envelope slipped under her door, Inside was a single page. You stepping back didn't end this. It clarified it. Lena pressed the paper to her chest, tears finally spilling. The next morning, Darius arrived with news. Victor's support is cracking, he said. The board is reconsidering leadership alignment. Julian nodded slowly. Good. Darius hesitated. There's more. The independent review committee wants Lena present. Julian looked toward the guest wing. For what? He asked. Darius smiled slightly. To tell her mother's story, officially. Julian felt something loosen in his chest. That night, Lena stood once more at the window. The city hadn't changed, but she had. She had learned that strength wasn't always loud, that love sometimes meant distance, that sacrifice, when chosen freely, wasn't weakness. Victor had underestimated her. The city had misread her, and Julian had seen her clearly from the beginning. The game wasn't over, but for the first time, Lena wasn't bracing for impact. She was standing exactly where she meant to be. Not at the center of the storm, but at the point where it could no longer reach the people she loved. The invitation arrived at dawn. It wasn't dramatic. No envelope sealed with wax, no threatening tone. Just a carefully worded email sent simultaneously to Julian, Lena, Darius, and 3 members of the Independent Review Committee. Subject: Community Impact Review. Rosewood Bend attendance required. Lena Harper. Lena read it twice, her fingers still, her heartbeat loud in her ears. They wanted her voice, not as a scandal, not as a fiancé, not as a problem to be managed, but as testimony. She closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. The river had answered. Julian stood in the doorway of the guest wing when Lena stepped out an hour later, dressed simply, dark slacks, a modest blouse, hair pulled back. No armor, no disguise, just herself. You don't have to face them alone, Julian said quietly. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in days didn't feel like she had to brace herself. I know, she replied, but this is something I need to do standing on my own feet. Julian nodded, respect written into every line of his face. Then I'll be right where you can see me. She smiled faintly. That's enough. The review took place in a large but unadorned conference room overlooking the river that cut through the city. Another river, tamed by concrete and glass. How fitting. Lena noticed the difference immediately. No cameras, no gossip bloggers, no Carmen, no Victor. Just people, papers, quiet attention. She took her seat at the long table, palms resting flat on the surface to keep them steady. The chair of the committee, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes, spoke first. Miss Harper, she said, thank you for being here. Lena inclined her head. Thank you for asking me. We are reviewing historical and current claims related to land near Rosewood Bend, the woman continued. Your mother's name appears repeatedly in early documentation. We believe your perspective is necessary. Necessary. Lena swallowed. She thought of Grandma Evelyn's voice. Now you're ready. I'll tell you what I know, Lena said, and what I lived. For the next hour, Lena spoke. She spoke of her mother, not as a footnote, but as a woman who believed words could protect people. Of Rosewood Bend, not as undeveloped land, but as home. Of men with clipboards who smiled while quietly threatening livelihoods. Of pressure that didn't bruise skin, but crushed futures. She didn't dramatize. She didn't beg. She told the truth like it deserved to be told, clearly, calmly, without apology. When she finished, the room was silent. The chair leaned forward. Miss Harper, why didn't you accept compensation and walk away when it was offered? Lena met her gaze steadily. Because walking away doesn't stop the current. It just moves it downstream, onto someone else. Another committee member spoke. And your relationship with Mr. King? Lena paused. That began with a rescue, she said. But this, she gestured lightly around the room, this is not about him. This is about what happens when communities are treated like obstacles instead of people. No one interrupted. When the meeting ended, Lena felt lighter and heavier all at once. Outside the room, Julian waited. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her, something like awe in his eyes. You did that, he said finally. Lena exhaled. I survived it. Julian shook his head gently. No, you changed it. The ripple effects came faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, the independent committee released a preliminary statement. All development actions near Rosewood Bend are suspended pending a full historical and ethical review. Victor Hale's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone understood. The city buzzed, not with scandal, but with something more dangerous to people like Victor: accountability. At the hospital, Grandma Evelyn watched the news quietly, her eyes sharp despite the frailty of her body. They stopped, she said. For now, Lena replied. Grandma smiled slowly. Your mother would have liked that. Lena took her hand. I wish she were here. Grandma squeezed her fingers. She is, in every step you take. The call came that evening, not from Victor, from Carmen. Lena stared at the name on her phone for a long moment before answering. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. You won, Carmen said finally, her voice stripped of polish. Lena frowned. This isn't about winning. Carmen laughed softly. That's how I know you did. Another pause. I thought power meant control. Carmen continued. Visibility, influence. I thought love was leverage. And now? Lena asked quietly. And now, Carmen said, I realize I've never stood in front of anything real. Lena said nothing. I won't fight you anymore, Carmen added. I don't have the strength. I never wanted to fight you, Lena replied. Carmen exhaled shakily. Take care of him. Before Lena could respond, the line went dead. Victor Hale didn't retreat loudly. He retreated strategically. Resignations followed, reassignments, quiet distancing by people who sensed the tide turning. Julian watched it unfold from his office, expression unreadable. They're abandoning him, Darius observed. Yes, Julian said, before the river pulls them under too. Darius hesitated. There's something else. Julian looked up. Victor requested a final board appearance, Darius said. He wants to speak. Julian considered this, then nodded. Let him. The boardroom was full when Victor entered. He looked the same, polished, composed, but something fundamental had shifted. The room no longer leaned toward him. Victor's gaze flicked briefly to Lena, seated at the far end beside an independent advisor. Miss Harper, he said mildly, you've become influential. Lena met his gaze evenly. Influence is what happens when people listen. Victor smiled thinly. Enjoy it while it lasts. Then he turned to the board. He spoke of vision, of growth, of misunderstanding. But the room was different now. Questions were sharper, interruptions more frequent, patience thinner. When Victor finished, the chair cleared her throat. Thank you, she said. The board will now vote. Victor sat back, confident. The vote didn't go his way. By a narrow but decisive margin, Victor Hale was removed from all oversight, connected to community development and land acquisition. The room exhaled. Victor stood slowly. Well played, he said quietly, to Julian, to Lena, to the room itself. As he passed Lena, he paused. You were never supposed to be here, he murmured. Lena looked up at him. Neither were the people you tried to erase. Victor's eyes flickered, anger, respect, something unreadable. Then he walked out. That night, Julian found Lena on the balcony. The city lights looked different now, not smaller, but less threatening. It's over, Julian said softly. Lena shook her head. No, it's just redirected. Julian smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's been listening to rivers. Lena laughed quietly. They teach patience. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Julian spoke again, carefully. When you stepped back, he said, I understood why, but it didn't stop me from wanting to reach for you. Lena's breath caught. I didn't step away from you, she said. I stepped away from the noise. Julian turned toward her fully. Then can I ask something now, without contracts, without strategy? She met his gaze. Yes. Will you walk forward with me? Julian asked. Not because it's safe, not because it's useful, but because you choose it. Lena felt tears rise, unbidden. She thought of the river, of the stick in her hands, of choosing not to let go. Yes, she said. Julian reached for her hand, not possessive, not rushed. She let him. The return to Rosewood Bend was quiet and unannounced. No press, no speeches, just Lena, Julian, Tiana, and Grandma Evelyn, released from the hospital with a care plan finally funded and protected. The village gathered anyway, not because they were summoned, because they felt it. Lena stood near the riverbank, the same spot where everything had begun. The water moved steadily, unbothered by cities or boardrooms. Julian watched her, something settling deep in his chest. You saved my life here, he said. Lena shook her head. You saved it yourself. I just held the stick. Julian smiled. Sometimes that's enough. Grandma Evelyn rested on a chair nearby, watching them with quiet satisfaction. This land is safe, she said. For now. And longer than that, Julian replied, if you'll let us help protect it. Grandma studied him carefully, then nodded. On our terms, Julian smiled. Always. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the river gold, Lena sat on the bank alone for a moment. She pressed her fingers into the mud, feeling the solid ground beneath her. She thought of the girl she'd been, barefoot, afraid, brave without knowing it. She thought of the woman she was becoming, still afraid, still brave, but no longer alone. The river flowed on, and for the first time, Lena didn't feel like she was fighting the current. She was moving with it, toward whatever came next. The morning began with fear, not the loud, panicked kind, but the quiet kind that slid into Lena's chest the moment she heard a soft thud from the bedroom down the hall. Grandma? Lena called out, already moving. She found Grandma Evelyn seated on the edge of the bed, one hand gripping the mattress, the other pressed to her temple. Her face was pale, breath shallow. I'm all right, Grandma said quickly, pride flaring even as her voice trembled. Just stood up too fast. Lena dropped to her knees in front of her, heart racing. You promised you'd call me if you felt dizzy. I didn't want to wake you, Grandma replied gently. Julian appeared in the doorway seconds later, concern etched deep across his face. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He knelt beside Lena and waited, giving Grandma space, respect. Nurse Denise arrived within the hour. After careful checks, she exhaled. It's not a relapse, she said, but stress is still affecting her. She needs calm, stability, no sudden shocks. Lena swallowed hard. Calm felt like a luxury lately. When Grandma finally lay back down, resting, Lena stepped outside the small village house and pressed her palms together, breathing slowly. The river flowed nearby, steady and indifferent. Julian joined her, careful not to crowd her. She's safe, he said quietly. For now, Lena replied. But everything feels so fragile. Julian nodded. Then we protect the quiet. The village meeting that afternoon was anything but quiet. Word had spread fast that development near the river was officially suspended. Some villagers arrived smiling, relieved. Others came with folded arms and tight mouths. Reverend Marcus stood at the front, hands clasped. "We're here to talk," he said calmly. "Not to accuse, not to praise, just to speak honestly." The first few voices were grateful. "You saved our homes." "They listened because of you." "The river is safe." Then a man stood, older, weathered, anger carved deep into his face. "And what about the trouble?" he demanded, pointing at Lena. "Ever since the city found us, it's been lawyers, papers, outsiders watching us like animals." Murmurs followed. Lena felt heat crawl up her spine but stayed seated. "You brought rich people drama here," the man continued. "What happens when they come back again?" Silence fell. Every eye turned to Lena. She stood slowly. "I didn't bring greed here," she said quietly. "Greed already knew where to find you. I just refused to let it erase you quietly." The man scoffed. "Easy to say when you've got a billionaire standing beside you." Julian took a step forward, but Lena lifted a hand gently, stopping him. "I understand your fear," Lena continued. "I live with it too. Every day. But if we pretend nothing is happening, we lose without a fight." She looked around the room. "I didn't choose to meet Julian by the river. I chose not to let a man drown. Everything else followed." No one spoke. Finally, an elderly woman rose, leaning on her cane. "We raised this girl," she said firmly. "We watched her hands bleed, saving someone she didn't know. If standing up for us makes her guilty, then so am I." The tension eased, not completely, but enough. Reverend Marcus nodded. "We'll need representatives for the final city hearing," he said. "Elders, community voices." Lena raised her hand. "I'll go," Julian added, "and I'll be there, not to speak over anyone, but to make sure no one is silenced." That evening, Julian presented his proposal to the elders. Not contracts, not speeches, just papers laid out on the table. "This is not charity," he said plainly. "It's a partnership, community-controlled funds, healthcare access without strings, legal protection for the land, river preservation led by the village." One elder frowned. "We don't want to be owned." "You won't be," Julian replied. "You'll have veto power, oversight, the right to walk away." The room was quiet. Finally, Reverend Marcus spoke. "Why do this?" Julian didn't hesitate. "Because my family once helped harm this place, and because Lena showed me what responsibility looks like." Lena felt her throat tighten. After a long pause, the elders nodded. "On our terms," one said. Julian smiled. "Always." Later that night, Carmen arrived. No cameras, no designer entourage, just a simple car parked at the edge of the village. She asked to speak to Lena alone. They sat near the riverbank, moonlight shimmering across the water. "I won't pretend I was kind," Carmen said quietly. "I wasn't." Lena waited. "Victor fed me stories," Carmen continued. "He framed you as a threat. I helped spread things I shouldn't have." "Why tell me now?" Lena asked. Carmen looked out at the river. "Because I watched you refuse to disappear, and because I don't want to be that woman anymore." She handed Lena a flash drive. "Emails, contracts, instructions, smear coordination, land pressure timelines, everything I have." Lena stared at it. "Why give this to me?" Carmen met her gaze. "Because you didn't fight me the way I expected, and because someone should choose truth over pride at least once." After Carmen left, Lena sat alone for a long time, staring at the river. Julian approached quietly. "She came to me too," he said. "Told me she was done." Lena nodded. "People change when the current turns." But the city wasn't finished trying to wound her. By morning, new gossip surfaced. She trapped him with innocence. She's playing pure to control him. Village girl strategy. Lena read the words once, then set the phone down. Julian found her later, jaw tight with anger. I can shut it down, he said. Statements, legal warnings. No, Lena replied softly. I won't let my body or my values become part of the argument. Julian studied her. Doesn't it hurt? Yes, Lena admitted, but I won't change myself to make liars comfortable. Julian took her hands gently. Your boundaries, he said, are not weakness. They're the reason none of this broke you. She squeezed his fingers. Promise me something. Anything. Never defend me by speaking over me. Julian nodded immediately. I swear. That night, Reverend Marcus arrived with a sealed envelope. I was told to give this to you only if the king name returned to your life, he said quietly. Lena's hands shook as she accepted it. Inside was a letter, written in her mother's careful handwriting. My Lena, if you're reading this, it means the river called you back to a fight. I tried to end quietly. Lena's breath caught. I didn't tell you everything because I wanted you to grow without fear. But know this, you were never meant to belong to the city. You were meant to choose it, or refuse it, on your own terms. Tears blurred the page. There are truths buried beneath paper and silence, and there are people who will try to own you because they cannot control you. Remember, standing still is also a choice. Lena closed the letter, shaking. Julian watched her, concern deepening. What is it? She knew, Lena whispered. She knew this would come back. Julian rested his hand over hers. And she trusted you to face it. The next day, preparations began for the final city hearing. Not a wedding, but something just as binding. Lena stood by the river one last time before leaving, barefoot in the mud, fingers brushing the water, the same river that had changed everything. She whispered, I won't let them take you. Behind her, Julian watched silently, understanding something deep and permanent settle into his chest. This wasn't a love story about diamonds or rings. It was about choosing dignity when the world offered shortcuts, about holding ground when the current pushed hardest. And as Lena turned back toward the village, toward the city, toward the truth waiting ahead, the river flowed on, and this time it flowed with her. The dawn of the final hearing arrived without ceremony. No sirens, no breaking alerts, no urgent knocks at the door. Just light, soft, patient light sliding over Rosewood Bend, touching the river first, then the roofs of the houses, then the faces of the people who had gathered quietly near the community hall. Some stood with arms folded, some with hands clasped, some with eyes closed in prayer, all of them waiting. Lena stepped outside Grandma Evelyn's house and felt it, the stillness that comes before something irreversible. Grandma sat on the porch wrapped in a light shawl, her posture straight despite the frailty in her body. When she saw Lena, her eyes softened. You ready? Grandma asked. Lena nodded, though her chest felt tight. As I'll ever be. Grandma reached for her hand. Remember, you don't carry this alone. Lena squeezed her fingers, drawing strength from the familiar touch. Down by the dirt road, the car waited. Julian stood beside it, not in a suit, not in armor, just himself. Tiana leaned against the door, arms crossed, jaw set in determination. You look like someone who's about to change history, Tiana said. Lena let out a breath. I look like someone who's trying not to throw up. Tiana smiled. Same thing. As they drove away, Lena looked back at the river one last time. It moved calmly, the way it always had, unconcerned with courts or contracts or reputations. Keep me steady, Lena thought, like you did that day. The city building where the hearing took place was intentionally plain, No marble, no glass walls, no symbols of power, just concrete, wood, and rows of seats filled with people who had come not to be entertained, but to decide something that mattered. Lena sat at the long table beside Reverend Marcus and two village elders. Julian sat a few seats away, not beside her, not in front of her, where he belonged, present, but not leading. Across the room, representatives shuffled papers. Lawyers whispered. Observers leaned forward with interest. Victor Hale was not there. That absence spoke louder than his presence ever had. The chair of the panel, a woman with calm eyes and a voice that didn't bend, opened the session. "We are here to conclude the Rosewood Bend Land and Community Review," she said. "We will hear final statements before rendering our decision." Lena felt her pulse in her ears. The first speaker summarized the findings. Improper survey filings, ethical breaches, intimidation tactics, withheld approvals, and a pattern of pressure designed to exhaust communities into silence. Each point landed like a stone. Then the chair turned toward Lena. "Miss Harper," she said, "you may speak." The room stilled. Lena stood. For a moment she didn't say anything. She let the silence do its work. Let people really look at her, not as a headline, not as a symbol, but as a person. "My mother used to say the river remembers," Lena began quietly. "It remembers who tried to take too much, and who stood still." A few heads tilted, listening. "She believed that land isn't empty just because someone powerful wants it to be," Lena continued. "It holds footsteps, stories, promises." Lena looked around the room. "Rosewood Bend is not underdeveloped. It is lived in." She spoke of mornings filled with work, evenings filled with shared meals, children learning to swim in shallow waters, watched by elders who remembered when the river was wilder. She did not cry. She did not plead. She told the truth as if it were solid ground beneath her feet. "I didn't come here to ask for special treatment," Lena said. "I came here to ask that the rules apply to everyone, including those who believe they're above them." She gestured gently toward the documents on the table. "My mother tried to do this quietly," Lena said. "She believed if she spoke calmly enough, they would listen." Lena's voice tightened just slightly. "They didn't." The room was silent. "So now I speak," Lena continued. "Not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. Rosewood Bend deserves protection, not because it's profitable, but because it is home." She sat down. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, it was respectful. Julian closed his eyes briefly, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding leaving his chest. The panel recessed. Minutes passed, then hours. Lena drank water she barely tasted. Tiana squeezed her knee once beneath the table. Reverend Marcus murmured a prayer under his breath. Finally, the panel returned. The chair rose. "This decision is binding," she said. Lena's heart hammered. "Rosewood Bend will be granted protected community status. All development efforts are permanently restricted unless initiated by the community itself, under independent oversight." A collective breath left the room. "Additionally," the chair continued, "all prior actions taken to pressure or misrepresent the community are formally condemned. Investigations into those responsible will continue." Lena felt tears sting her eyes, not of fear, not of exhaustion, of release. "This panel recognizes the advocacy of Miss Lena Harper," the chair concluded, "not as a benefactor, but as a witness." The gavel fell. It was over. The celebration in Rosewood Bend was quiet. No banners, no speeches, just food shared, hands clasped, shoulders leaned together. Grandma Evelyn sat at the center of it all, smiling softly as people greeted her. "They listened," she said to Lena. "They did," Lena replied. "And they will keep listening," Grandma added, "because you taught them how." Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the village grew still again, Lena walked alone toward the river. She needed to see it. She stepped into the mud barefoot, the cool earth grounding her. She crouched and let her fingers skim the surface of the water. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Behind her, footsteps approached slowly. Julian stopped a few feet away, respecting the moment. "You did something today that most people spend their lives avoiding," he said quietly. Lena looked up at him. "What's that?" "You chose truth without armor." Lena smiled faintly. "I was terrified." Julian nodded. "That's usually how it works." They stood side by side, watching the river flow. "About us," Julian said carefully. Lena turned toward him fully. "There's no pressure," he continued. "No expectations, no plans written in ink." Lena studied his face, the man she had pulled from the water, the man who had learned when to step back. "I don't want a story that belongs to other people," she said. Julian met her gaze. "Neither do I." Lena took his hand, her choice, her timing. "We walk forward," she said, slowly, honestly. Julian's thumb brushed her knuckles, gentle. "That's all I want." They stood like that for a long moment, neither rushing, neither retreating. The river flowed. Later that night, Lena sat on Grandma's porch, with the letter from her mother open on her lap. She read the last lines again. "If the river ever calls you to choose between comfort and truth, choose truth. Comfort fades, truth builds." Lena folded the letter carefully. Grandma watched her, eyes knowing. "She trusted you," Grandma said. "I know," Lena replied, "and now I trust myself." Grandma smiled. "That's how you know you're ready." Ready for what? Lena didn't know yet, but she felt it coming. The season could have ended there, with justice served, with love chosen, with land protected. But life rarely stops at neat endings. 3 days later, a document arrived. No return address, no signature, just a copy of an old registry record. Lena sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the page, her fingers trembling slightly as she read. The document detailed ancestral land claims, older than corporate filings, older than survey maps. One name was circled in red ink. Not Lena's, not her mother's, a different surname, connected to her mother's past, connected to Rosewood Bend, connected to a line that suggested something deeper than anyone had admitted. Julian read over her shoulder, his expression sharpening. "This changes things," he said quietly. Lena swallowed. "Why didn't she tell me?" Lena whispered. Julian placed a steadying hand on her back. "Maybe she hoped you'd never need to know." Lena looked toward the river through the window. "But the river remembers," she said, and it wasn't finished speaking. That night, as the village slept, Lena stood once more at the water's edge. She thought of who she had been, a girl with bleeding hands and no plan, just courage. She thought of who she was now, a woman who understood that power didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waited. The river moved quietly before her, carrying secrets from past to future. Lena didn't fear it anymore. She understood it. Season 1 did not end with an answer. It ended with a promise. The river would keep flowing. And so would she. Here comes the end of the story. If I was able to make your day, comment Mr. Hope you made my day.